Hey guys, I'm Daniel Morad, professional GT driver and Simucube ambassador, and today we're going to have a look at the Simucube ActivePedals. Simucube was kind enough to send me the Simucube ActivePedals in advance of the public release, and very lucky to have these pedals before anyone. I believe I'm the first person outside of Simucube to actually have these pedals on my rig. So it's a really big honor because these are very much anticipated. And I have to say before we get going, I am a Simucube ambassador, like I mentioned. So my opinions could be taken as biased, but I only work with Simucube because they're a top level company and I always want the best quality products. And they have no control over what I say in this video. So I'm gonna give you my honest feedback and just my perspective from a pro racing driver's point of view. I know that there could be some feedback from sim racers, but most people wanna know how these are going to compare to the real car. And that's something that I can give you the feedback on because I raced the AMG GT3 in real life and also the GT4. So I've been able to play around with them over the past 2 months and really get a good feel for what they're capable of. And of course, they're constantly developing. These are pre-released. These are the actual exact pedals that were at the Sim Racing Expo in Germany for the public to try. And since then, the software has been developed almost every week, every other week. We're constantly giving feedback and developing these pedals to be even better for the public release. In terms of the design aspect, I mean, they're actually stunning. They're beautiful. It's all metal design, super high quality as you would expect from Simucube. There's a few things around here that I'm not 100% certain will be released on the final consumer model, but I actually really enjoy this pedal plate because for me, a heel stopper is so important. It's where you set your feet, and there's a beautiful custom Simucube heel stop, and this entire plate itself is absolutely ginormous in order to house these two pedals. But yeah, just turning it to the side a little bit, you can kind of see the sheer size of these pedals. They're absolutely enormous, but it's interesting because, I mean, these pedals are fully motorized, and when you push them down, there's absolutely no resistance to it. It's just like going freely, and there's a screwdriver motor, I believe, inside. Again, I'm not a technician or an engineer, I'm just a driver, so I can tell you how they feel when I put my feet on them, but in terms of specs, I'm not 100% familiar. I can talk about the construction all day and how beautiful these are, but I really am more interested in bolting these onto the rig and looking through the software and how they actually perform, because at the end of the day, I'm always looking for a product that's going to give me performance on the track and potentially give me more immersion. I mean, if I can blend those two together, it's the best of both worlds. I never look for immersion over performance because I'm a competitive kind of guy. It's what I do for a living. I like to win races, or try to anyway. And I mean, I think these, after testing them for the past 2 months, are literally the perfect blend between immersion and giving you that extra edge on the track. So we're gonna bolt these to the rig and we're gonna give it a go, and I'll show you through some of the software adjustments we can make. Now I'm at the rig. I pulled up the ActivePedal software, and keep in mind this is pre-released and we're constantly working on it, but I just thought that it would be interesting to look at the potential that you have at simply like a mouse click. You can change the pedal completely to your personal taste and your style of driving. Depending on the car as well, it's really, really interesting. And you may think that having an active pedal for a throttle could be overpowering or maybe a little overkill, but it is really interesting, especially through all the development we've done and me working together with the engineers at Simucube and giving feedback. We've added a few different elements so it's ready for the consumer launch. For instance, things like the preload on throttle. That's something that was very important for me because it felt like I can tip into the throttle too quickly if I had my foot resting there, and it just like ramped up really quick. But I just love that there's presets already there for you to pick from. You can pick a linear preset at a click of a button, and you can have a more linear approach to your throttle application, like a squared off approach, cubed. Not my cup of tea. I just find it very strange, and it just rolls in very, very quickly. Too quickly. You can see how you get 40% very, very quick, and then it just ramps up in a weird way. You can go exponential, which is even further in the wrong direction for my taste. The S-curve, I don't really like that because I feel like it's inconsistent, especially through the middle range on throttle. And logarithmic, which this is my personal preference. This is what I typically run. I just feel like it's quick to, I don't know, I just have good control right here in the beginning of throttle. And then from 40% all the way up to 100, I have a really long throw to control the throttle application. So I feel like I can get to a good amount of throttle application, and then I can control that last little bit very, very well, especially if you have high horsepower cars. You want to avoid wheel spin. It's huge advantage to have that kind of system in place. You can also adjust the pedal travel at a click of a button, which is so interesting. It's so easy. You don't need to go underneath your rig, rip your pedals apart, and change anything. I can simply drag the slider down. If I want a really short throw on the throttle, I can go down all the way to 5 millimeters, and you can see like the pedal doesn't move. If you want to increase that throw, you can take it all the way out to 67.5 millimeters, and now just look how much control I have on the throttle. That's a bit long for me. I really found a sweet spot around 66 centimeters. I love that. Feels similar to the AMG GT3 and GT4 I'm driving in real life. So that's just really, really awesome. And of course, preload, I mentioned this before. I typically run around like 3.5 kilograms of preload, just so when I rest my foot on the pedal, it doesn't activate the throttle. I can just rest my foot there and not creep on. You have things like damping, which is so nice, and these are things we've been adjusting in software, but you can adjust, a lot of damping, and that basically just gives it more of a spongy effect and smooths out the throttle application. So, if I push down, you can see I can push down and then release, and the throttle comes off. It's almost like automatic throttle if you dial it in correctly. But I really liked through the different software that we've come up with. I haven't really come up with anything. I've just given my feedback, to be honest. But 6%, I really like that. I feel like it's smooth. It's just dampened enough, but snappy at the same time, and I have really good control in throttle. You can change it to either a load sensor input or position input. I have it on position. I want it to recognize the position of the pedal, not so much load that I'm putting into it. And then, just last points really on throttle. You can add motor vibration, which I kind of like because on top of my motion rig that I'm running with, I just have a little bit more tactile feedback or haptic feedback in my foot, which is really, really nice. So you can dial those settings into your personal preference. I haven't really spent much time on it. I just more or less dialed in at 1 on the frequency multiplier, and just the settings you see on screen, I was happy with them. Moving along to the brake, this is the interesting part. This is ultimately where I think lap time will be won or lost, and in this case, won, because I've noticed that the brake is an insane game changer for me, and almost like a cheat code. Once I just went through the settings, I found, again, there's linear, there's all the same sort of curves you can run with the throttle, but on the brake side, I typically would run a linear, like in the past I've run linear brake, but now that I've discovered the logarithmic shape, it changed the game for me. Not only is this pedal super precise, but you can change the curve of the brake application and the strength in which where it gets strong throughout the braking phase, like so how hard you have to push for it to or how far you have to push for it to get really hard. So in the beginning it's relatively let's say softer here, but I have really good control, so I don't have to push with all my life to actually brake the car up to like 30%. I can really just squeeze and get that super nice easy control. And then when I want the big pressure, it ramps up, it gets stiffer, but I have a larger range to actually control that hard pressure. So I can really pinpoint my peak pressure point. So if I'm looking for 75% or 74%, I can really just like get to like the brake pressure value, 80%. very, very comfortable. And you can dial that in for however strong you are. Everyone's legs different. Everyone's braking style is a little bit different. So the beautiful thing is you can make this pedal your own. You can also add preload in the beginning. So if you want a very soft tip-in point, or if you want to stiffen that up and just be able to rest your foot against the pedal without activating the brake, I have mine around 7 or 8 kilograms. That's more or less how I have mine. Also, pedal travel. This is something I've always wanted in a pedal. I've wanted to be able to adjust and have a long throw like my race car, but the only downside is with a normal, let's say like load cell with elastomer setup on the brake, the downfall of that would be to get the longer travel, you need softer elastomers, and the softer elastomers equals more inconsistency in terms of brake application and the load on the load cell. And so with this, you can have your cake and eat it too. And who doesn't like cake? I mean, I like cake. But yeah, you can make a long throw, really get good control over a long distance of pedal press or pedal application. But you also have insane precision. So if you want a short throw, let's say you're driving a prototype and you prefer this style, you can go down to like 20, let's say 25 millimeters, 2.5 centimeters of travel, and bam, the brake is right there. If you want to have more of a GT style brake, and again, every car is different. You can go up to 60 millimeters, 63.6 actually on here. I like to have mine around 50. That's my sweet spot, and I dialed it in for me. And added a little bit of damping, and I touched on this on the throttle, but you can add a lot of damping on the brake as well. So let's say on the brake release, you want to smooth off that release. You don't want it to be so jumpy. You can actually just dial this all the way up. Let's say 100%. Watch how long it takes to release. So you can actually take your foot fully off, and it just releases for you. Or for me, I typically have it around 10%. I like that. It seemed to just take all those jitters out and smooth off my brake release, so I can fully control the car on turn in. And this goes for the brake and the throttle, is you can actually adjust the stiffness. So you can adjust this up to, let's say you want 40 kilogram press of the throttle, so really stiff throttle. You can adjust that up. I have mine around 7.5 kilograms, and same with the brake. You can adjust the max force. So I have mine set around what the GT3 and GT4 would be, around 76, 75 kilograms of max brake force. And people always think that you need the hardest brake possible to get precision, but you really don't. Like anytime I see brakes calibrated at 150 kilograms, you have the option here on the Simucube software, on the ActivePedal software, but it's just something that's going to tire you out, and you don't really need that for the ultimate precision and control. I have this set to load sensor input. I'm not like an engineer, and I don't really know too much of the difference, but I just found like it was smoother when I personally ran the throttle on input mode, on position input, sorry, and the brake on load sensor input. I just felt like I had a lot more control on that. So yeah, there's a ton of other new settings that keep getting added every day. And I'm sure by the time you guys see this, it will be very close to the consumer release, and this could even look a bit different. Just keep in mind, this is all pre-release, and we're constantly changing things. It didn't look like this a month ago, so it was very, very bare bones, and just again constantly working with the engineering team, giving my feedback as a driver, what I would look for, what I feel is necessary to have on pedals this powerful. And lastly, I mean, the ABS, that's the coolest aspect. You have the ability to fine-tune the frequency of the ABS, so how quickly it pulsates. You can change the amplitude range, so at what point it's really let's say working hard on the ABS. And that's still something I have to play with, because we just got a software update, and I have to see what the parameters of the amplitude are now, because it changes. 25% last week doesn't mean 25% now, so I really have to dial this in and yeah, let's say dive deeper in. Smoothness as well, that's a really interesting slider. I personally, I love it at 100% smoothness, because in the real car we have there's not a lot of feedback on ABS. Everyone thinks that you feel wheel lockup, you feel all this sort of feedback, but really it's one pulsation essentially, just to more or less trigger
the ABS and give you that feeling like, okay, you're into the ABS. And that's the indication that you need to start bleeding off that peak pressure point, because if you just keep your foot driven through the foot, through the pedal, you're not really stopping any better. You're actually stopping potentially worse, because you're allowing a computer to dictate how you slow down. So you're always better as a driver to have that within your control. So anyone that tells you that you're braking on the ABS all the time is completely, let's say, misinformed. So coming from a pro GT3 driver and GT4 driver, you typically would brake into ABS, and then immediately you get that feedback and you release off of that peak pressure and just ride that that threshold all the way into your turn-in point, and then you again have your second phase of release on the pedal as you turn in. That just gives you the best control. I mean, with these pedals, it's unreal. You have the entire, you have any pedal you want at the click of a mouse. You just slide some of these sliders around, and you can completely change the pedal for each car and each racetrack that you drive. So for me, this is an insane game changer, and I'll just wrap up back at the review desk for my closing thoughts.
As you saw, these pedals are pretty wild. There's a few things I love about these pedals. The first thing is how precise they are, especially when it comes to braking, because ultimately the braking performance is what dictates your speed into a corner. And having the amount of control and the level of control, not just in terms of position relative to the game's positioning from your foot to the actual software, but just the amount of control you can have over this through changes, the length of the brake travel, the stiffness of the brake, the curves of how the brake is actually being implemented. That is something I've never seen in any other pedal on the market. I've finally been able to get the pedal travel with the correct stiffness and precision. So it's a win-win-win across the board. So that's really, really interesting. And being able to switch from car to car just by the switch, basically just clicking a button and changing the profile. You can change these pedals from a prototype feel, a Formula car feel, a GT car. You can literally make it whatever you want. You can make it a rally car feel. So it's really something so unique to this pedal itself. And something I didn't think I would find so interesting was actually the throttle. It may seem overkill to have a throttle pedal that's capable of this much, but having that adjustment range, being able to really adjust the throw of your pedal, for someone like myself or any other pro driver that races in real life, having this adjustment or this level of adjustment is so valuable to me. I can tune these pedals to feel exactly like my race car for any weekend I'm preparing for. And I can ultimately use these as a training tool even more than I could any other pedal set now that they're feeling 99.9% similar to the cars I'm driving in real life. So this is just a win-win across the board. I'm so excited to be working with Simucube, and I can't wait for you guys to actually get your feet on these pedals as well.